Greetings and welcome to Voices Less Said podcast show with Dr. PMAC, a show where I speak with ordinary people doing extraordinary things. A couple of months ago, I found myself sitting at a bar in downtown Seattle in the US, and this was just after a book event where I just launched my memoir in Seattle, and my friend was just chatting with a lady who was sitting next to us in the bar. It turns out we were having a conversation with award-winning musician Carolyn Willis, and Carolyn is an accomplished violinist and violin instructor in Bellevue, Seattle. I've developed a friendship with Carolyn, and I'm excited to have a conversation with her on this show, sharing her wit and intelligence with you all. Join us as we speak with Carolyn today. I just shared with my listeners that, just finished a book event in downtown Seattle, and my friend and I are just sitting, winding up time and, just talking about the event and how it went. And here we are, we find ourselves chatting with this lady who was sitting next to us. And later, I discovered that I was talking to Carolyn Willis, who is an accomplished violinist and a violin instructor. How was that encounter for you? Wasn't that weird? Like two random guys from Canada chatting, and here you are.
I talk to people all the time. I talk to people in the grocery store, and I talk to people. But I just run into folks, and it's interesting. We were talking about you don't know what it is you see. But you see their lively eyes, and you see that they're listening, and you see that you're like, really? So tell me more about this, and tell me more. Yeah.
And that's the power of the human connection, right? That I think as human beings, and this is what I think, human beings, we love to chat with people. We love to connect, right? But in this day and age, people never just make space and time to do that. People never rarely make space to just stop and, sit and listen and then chat. So it was really, really just great for you to be so accommodating to us.
It was really funny because I wasn't listening to your conversation. I think I was telling you before, the thing that I remember, I had just been to the Flower and Garden show, and I was having one of those days when I was sure I just lost my mom, and it was always my daughter thing. And I was sure there was going to be so many tears and all this, and I made it through, and I'm like, everything's okay. I made it through, and I was busily making plans for okay, I'm going to re-landscape my entire side garden. Greenhouse here, and I'm putting in French doors. And you guys were talking about whenever Wise back from shopping. And I was because that's what I remember turning to you. I'm looking at French doors and stuff. And I'm like, be thankful you're not shopping for this.
For sure. And so as we start conversing, we immediately spoke about a whole lot of things. We started with the politics, and we went this and this and this direction. And so let's start there, perhaps. You've got a very interesting resume or CV, and we'll talk a bit about your musical career. So where do things stand now politically? Are things normal now in Seattle? Are there still protests? What's the landscape like?
The next big one is, I don't know if you've heard, but for his birthday, he would like. Which I believe is June 14th. He wants to have a military parade. He wants to spend, it's some obscene number of millions of dollars, which, God forbid we feed children or educate people or, fund Meals on Wheels. So he wants to spend this for a big military parade. And there's been a big stink about it, because if he actually rolls tanks down the street, he's going to destroy the streets as well. They're like, well, so maybe they can do this and maybe they can do that. It's just it's a lot of crazy. Most of my friends and acquaintances are very my whole studio is from somewhere else. And the kids are busily trying to navigate the different world. And, I don't know who else here on a green card and who's here on a visa and who's here, but it's really lovely parents. And friends, of course, are educated. And, but you go talk to other people, Seattle area is a really blue state. And we were talking about this, Seattle area, it's the education level is very high. It's a tech corridor. Everybody knows people from somewhere. Everybody, everybody's traveled.
Yeah,
Gibbs
true.
lives around here.
Hmm.
It's a politically blue kind of area. So, you go to the protests and it's huge. The
Wow.
the first big one that we had, oh my goodness, I forget what the date was, but it was in
Hmm.
April. But they said, the news was reporting this many, and you could see the drones overhead.
Hmm.
You could see, but the
Yep.
Science Center was full. I mean, it was
Hmm.
full. It was just slammed full of people. Uh,
Hmm.
And they've said it was between 1% and 2% of the U.S. populace showed up.
Wow.
And that was the first big hands-off march. And it's been
Yeah.
going like that. But every Saturday you go to any street corner, you you go to downtown Bellevue, which is it's very shitty.
Yeah.
Um, and you'll see, outside the nursing homes, there
Wow.
are there are people in wheelchairs protesting.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
There. It's the indecency of it.
So
We're
what's
so
what's your
good.
biggest so when you reflect on all of that's happening right now, what's what's your biggest fear, right? As you live in Seattle, as you see all these things happening in Washington DC and stuff like that, what's the biggest fear?
Oh my goodness. There's a lot of them.
Hmm.
Honestly, um, I'm scared for the country as a whole.
Yeah.
I think that the people that think that they're good with money think that they
Mm.
know a lot of stuff, uh,
Mm.
and they don't.
Mm.
The number of people that are interdependent on each other and are oblivious
Yeah.
to how, I've got farmers in the family.
Yeah.
So, the people who don't realize that fertilizer comes from Canada.
Yeah.
The people in the Northwest that don't realize that timber comes from Canada. The people in
Yeah.
California we were talking about.
Yeah.
The reconstruction that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I deal with kids, I'm really
Yeah.
scared for the fact that we're shoving citizens in vans right now. There,
Mm.
you go on any of the social media, and
Yeah.
there'll be somebody had their Ring camera up and they saw their spouse being carried off.
Oh
In
my
unmarked
gosh.
van. I mean, it's terrifying.
Yeah,
Um,
that's terrifying. Yeah.
but my biggest fear is that we get blasé about this.
Yeah.
This is not what America is, and
Mm.
is not. And I'm horrified when we talk about going out in the world. Uh,
Mm.
because I've traveled a good bit, and I've
Yeah.
traveled, and my teachers have been from. Most of my teachers were Russian Jews.
Yeah.
So people talk about like, well, I was able to get out, and I was able. One of my teachers said, excuse me,
Mm.
that they had applied for asylum to the West, and
Yeah.
so lucky. He was a professor at Moscow Conservatory. His wife,
Yeah.
I believe, also. We were so lucky. They fired us both that day. They came
Mm.
for my violin. They came for my son's violin. They came for
Mm.
the piano the next day, and then
Mm.
it took us 6 months to get out. And
Mm.
you listen to normal people who you would never know
Yeah.
went through, like, and you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. That's
and
that's
and
so.
yeah,
Mm.
we think it can't happen here, and I'm like, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you speak a little bit about violin and sort of your musical journey. So let's go to that. What initially drew you to the violin, and how did your journey as a musician start?
Well, I don't have any musicians in the family. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
my mom, when I was growing up, didn't have money for lessons, so I ended up getting
Mm-hmm.
a job quite
Yeah.
quite young to pay for them.
Okay.
I
Mm-hmm.
started in the public schools talk when I talk about how what I would have heard first,
Yeah. Yeah.
not musical parents. So, I'm
Wow.
sure what I heard first, like I remember being sitting on the kindergarten floor, and you're
Uh-huh.
sitting cross-legged on the floor like a little kid.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I heard what must have been a school orchestra mangling, I'm sure some twinkle or something. And I
Uh-huh.
just remember, like, I can feel the cement under my fanny. I can
Mm.
smell the room, and I
Mm.
just remember, like, just like a tunnel. I was just like, and then I had to wait to start.
Yeah.
So I had to
Wow.
really hustle. When I was a kid,
Wow.
I was always,
Yeah.
sure I was going to be a surgeon. I
Yeah.
wanted to do trauma surgery from the time I was 4, and
Uh-huh.
I progressively got better teachers, and I was like,
Yep.
oh my God, I could do this.
Yep.
So I went from, we've talked a lot about things become
Yes.
real. You got to
Yes.
prep
Yep.
kids for anything. If
Yep.
you don't make them think, then they can't go like, oh my goodness, I love this. I want this so badly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then go,
Mm.
And the arts are, I mean, the arts are scary.
Wow.
They're very scary.
And so yeah, you are taking yourself through, and you said you had to work to pay for your classes?
Yeah, I had my first job when I was 11. My parents split when I was very, very young. So my
Yeah.
mom was on her own. She didn't have family in town.
Okay.
My family's all in Kansas.
Yeah.
So she was during a time frame when women, didn't get college degrees and women didn't get jobs and women didn't get, and she couldn't have purchased another house in her name.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
she had to just put her head down and work like a lunatic. So my
Wow.
mom was busily, so I would have been about 5. And when I started taking over some of the responsibilities at home, and then by the time I was 9, my mom was working full time and going to school full time.
Wow.
So no money for any of that. I mean, we were barely food on the table. And, I mean, and again, for my American suburban standards is like a very different creature.
Sure.
It's a different creature, but it was hard. So, so I got my first like official job when I was 11. So I was in Italy, and that was enough to start to pay for some lessons.
For your lessons, yeah. And so you maintained with the interest throughout middle school, high school, or did you take a break from violin to pursue other interests?
Typical for us. I mean, just to give you some context for the level of crazy I got going on. Start when we're 4 or 5.
Wow.
With a decent private teacher. For the people that are still afloat.
Yep.
Let's start at 4 or 5 with a decent private teacher.
Yep.
Sometimes twice a week lessons.
Okay.
You're doing at least an hour. Typically, like pre-conservatory kids are doing 7 hours a day.
Wow. 7 hours.
But no, several hours a day.
Oh, several hours. Okay.
Several hours. I mean, I did. I always tell my students I did 4 to 6, like a.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I was expected to pull A's, and my mom was very much like you get the A's, then, and she was very much. You got to remember, my mom was working full time and going to school full time, so she's working at Boeing, and schools used to. Companies had a program where they would pay for you to go to college.
Okay.
As long as you did a certain number of hours, and because there weren't very many women engineers. If my mom worked 38 hours a week, then she'd go to college. And they would pay, which the University of Washington was $400 a semester in those days.
In those days.
In those days, yeah.
And now it's crazy. And so
not
and then
so much, yeah.
Yeah. And then so fast forward, you then start working. I mean, you then establish yourself within, the Seattle's classical music scene. You get a master's degree in violin performance from the University of Washington. How was that like? So was that now sort of the epitome, like the peak of your learning? And
I started, I did my undergrad at Whitman College. So my plan was still to go to medical school. So
you had to go to medical school?
Yeah. That was the plan. I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. And then I saw a trauma ward up close and personal. And I'm looking around, and everything there was preventable. And I thought, this is not what I want. I don't want to mop up work after human tragedy. I want to build joy. I want to build things. And it's hard because it didn't dawn on me that I could actually do this.
Wow. Okay.
But, I had seen my mom put her head down and work and be a lunatic,
Yeah.
And about that time, I got a much, much better teacher.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, it was kind of like, oh my goodness. And then there was a lot of changing majors because, that's what you do in your undergrad.
Yeah.
And Pittman, for your listeners, who I'm sure it's a little tiny school, it's a liberal arts college.
Okay.
My thinking was, for surgeons, you need to be able to think on your feet, especially for trauma surgery. So the whole idea, like, you've got all of these different things they make you study.
Yeah.
And they want to make minds that can solve problems. So you take more than one great thinker and then who don't agree. You take several great minds that disagree about things, and then you have to say, what would I do? What do I think? Why do I think this? Yeah.
So building up that critical thinking aspect, right?
Builds up the critical thinking. And so that was the idea. And then I switched majors. But so Mom and I made a deal that I could go ahead and pursue music.
Okay.
But I had to keep my grades up and I had to do all of the pre-med stuff. So I got out of there. I moved to Manhattan, and I was really, really lucky to get, again, I was at somebody's recital, and he introduced me to a friend of his who's a really fine violinist, and she introduced me to her teacher. So that was, again.
Was this the connection with Nina Billing and Zneda?
So that was Zina de Gillos.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
she was flying to a couple different countries to teach. I still cannot believe she took me.
Wow. Wow.
I used to go into Harlem with cash with my violin
Uh-huh.
really late at night. This is the secret to getting in with a fine, because these guys are trying to pay for several different apartments.
Yep.
And I don't know why she took me. Her assistant
Yeah.
hated me, but she was really kind. And
Wow.
so I got in, and she made enormous difference. And then she got quite sick with breast cancer, which she eventually
Uh-huh.
died from.
Wow.
So she ended up moving, and then she gave me to a friend of hers. She said, I really
Okay.
wanted you study with him. And that
Yeah.
was Samuel Ronkin. Samuel is
Okay.
how you say it properly. And then
Wow.
after that, I had some lessons with Nina Molina,
Yeah.
an Oistrakh student who I adore.
Wow.
Yeah, I went into her studio for the first. I'm terrified. I'm just terrified. I come in you open
Yeah.
the door to the apartment.
Uh-huh.
First thing I see is a grand piano, and sitting on the piano is, I didn't realize it was a copy. She has a Zygmuntowicz
Okay.
copy of Chrysler's instrument. We're talking
Ooh.
like a $30 million instrument. It
Wow.
might be more than that now.
Yeah.
So I see her Carnegie Hall poster hanging on the wall. And,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, oh my God, and but she's so sweet. She's so sweet.
Wow.
And she sent her kitty she had a little side room set up. She sent her kitty Mishka in to calm me down. And so when I
Wow.
played for her, she stood there and smoked and watched me,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of her. She's this
No.
little tiny thing. All these Russian teachers are all up to here on me.
Wow.
And just tiny and smoldery and beautiful. And I mean, gorgeous player.
Yeah.
And then, she just grabbed my face. She was so funny. She grabbed my face at the end of this, and she's like, you go downstairs. You write down, you get something to eat, you get something to drink, and then you go write down everything you need to. And then she's like, you're a good girl. Go practice. I was like, yes, ma'am.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I come from a very quiet, reserved Scandinavian family. It's not this.
Yeah. Wow. So that's amazing. And so you then, from New York, what then happened? Is it when you then enrolled into your master's program, or you continued to learn?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I had a stalker when I was in New York. I'm working all day and I'm practicing all night.
Yeah.
And I had a stalker, and someone I was working for, very rich, very connected, and I would have been in trouble. And so I called Mom and I said, can I come home for a bit? And so I came back and I worked with with a wonderful teacher. I worked with Leonard Kalin here.
Okay.
Who happened to be the stand partner of Mr. Ronkin.
Oh.
Which I didn't know until years later.
Wow.
It's a really small little world. It's weird little.
Yeah. It's a small little classroom, eh? Yeah.
Yeah. He was amazing.
Wow.
And then I got my master's here, because I built.
Wow. So fortuitously, you were just, having these amazing connections with world-class musicians, world-class violinists who then happened to, wow. It's a small classroom.
Yeah. It's a very, but you just keep getting up and doing the work. I mean,
keep getting up and doing the work. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to remember, I grew up watching my mom, who hadn't been taught to do anything like what she was doing. And you're a kid and you watch your parents, right?
Yeah.
And they're a fish out of water.
Yeah.
And you watch them. And she clearly, I didn't know how to do this, but she's not going to tell me. She's not going to go, I'm terrified. Let me just, lean on my kid for this. And so I had grown up watching her do this. So scared or not scared, you get up.
Wow.
That's
That's amazing. And so when I think about, and my kids and I were talking a couple of days ago, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna be interviewing Auntie Carolyn on the podcast.
Yeah.
And she does classical music, and like, classical music. And so my daughter was like, yeah, Dad, that one time I tried violin at school. I'm like, yeah, I remember what happened. And so my question is, how do you make, what's your approach, right, to making classical music more accessible, particularly to the younger generation now? What would be an approach that works? Yeah.
I mean, I always tell people, when you're looking for a teacher, they have to be able, where classical music really shines. Because I get all these kids that come in that want an Ivy. They want an Ivy very badly. And, the tradition in, like in Asia, you don't get one of the top high schools if you're not proficient.
Okay.
Because it boosts your IQ.
So is that very, very competitive there, right? In terms of being able to access those schools? Wow. So that
Very.
means there's
And
lots of rich, raw talent in terms of.
there's a ton of talent. There's a
Ah,
ton of talent. If you look
hmm.
at the history, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm gonna do my. I can dork out about this really hard. I was
sure.
gonna do my when you do a master's and then they call it a DMA, it's a doctorate.
Yeah.
I was gonna do my
Okay.
doctorate on the way that the educational system in Russia was set up.
Yeah.
You had three main feeder schools leading
Mm-hmm.
to Moscow Conservatory. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're Jewish, that was the only thing you were allowed to get. It's the first thing that anybody was
Yeah.
allowed to get a degree in
Yeah.
because it was considered unimportant.
Okay.
Right. And so, you've got three main feeder schools.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got people who almost made it. They go to this, they go and get into Moscow Conservatory. They go
Yeah.
study with this guy. And because there's enormous discrimination against Jewish people in Russia and
Mm,
elsewhere, right?
mm,
So
mm,
if you don't make it into the orchestras, which
mm-hmm.
again, hard on a good day, with
Yeah.
every advantage in the world,
Sure.
then you're ending up back in the Jewish ghetto.
Yeah.
And there was this loop going on of people who almost made it. And you think about
Okay.
a parent who almost made it, the
Yeah.
kind of lean that goes on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So it's a very practical system, but
Yeah.
that's the kind of like has to be better, has to be better, has to be better,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
and that kind of thing that comes from that culture. So when you talk about starting a kid, that's a
Yeah.
different. I think that one of the things you really have to think about with
Mm-hmm.
kids is that you've got to be able to give them an idea of the overview of what we're doing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you have to set them up one thing at a time because violin will make your head
Yeah.
explode in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to set
Wow.
up the form. And I always talk with my students, I talk about the form of the body. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to start with the spine, and then your
Mm-hmm.
shoulders need to be loose.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have, you can't see from here. I can adjust this.
Yeah.
You're going to have, like, this hand has to be turned, and you're going to turn off the center axis of the
Okay.
hand. And this
Mm-hmm.
hand has to be turned. Because basically what you got, this thing is a vibrating box. You got a string on a
Yeah.
box, and it's
Yeah.
shaped like the roof of the human mouth. That's where the violin
Mm-hmm.
shape
Oh.
camera. Yeah. So you know how in Rome, you know how they had an amphitheater and an amphitheater. If you put
Sure.
two
Yeah.
amphitheaters
Mm-hmm.
together, you get the Colosseum.
Yep.
And so this is what they do, and they're making a speaker box, and you're trying to make this thing vibrate. So you're going
Wow.
to
Okay.
drag your strings are sitting on this thing, and you're going to
Yeah.
drag the bow in a straight line across the strings.
Yeah.
So this is where you start. You start with just like, it's like, oh, okay, so I'm trying to do this because they're kids, and if you try
Yeah.
and teach too many things all at once, their
Yeah.
heads are going to explode. And then the next
That's
part is
amazing.
you
Mm-hmm.
teach them how to read what
Yeah.
the notes are because music's a
To
picture
read the
language.
notes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So you've got 5 lines, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this is a picture of how high or how low the notes go.
Yeah.
And then there's symbols for how long they are because paper was expensive. Would be the
Sure.
short
Yep.
version. So if
Yeah.
you have to hold a drone note for like an hour and a half, like nobody wants to, they were going off parchment in those
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
So anyhow, so this is the thing. So you're mapping what you
Mm.
see in terms of the picture here to what
Mm-hmm.
you do here. And all you're
Yeah.
really doing is you're making these strings shorter by putting a finger down and making the part that vibrates shorter or
Yep.
making the part longer.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I just think about the coordination, the technical mastery of it is just enough to just blow my up. Like, and I'm trying to read the notes as well. I'm trying to, wow.
But
This,
you
yeah,
have to take the skills apart.
You have
And
to
that's
take the skill.
the job. So
Okay.
I don't think I've had a parent of a 5-year-old come in yet who's like, oh, they can absolutely focus for a full hour. I'm like,
Yeah.
they can't.
No.
Like,
So
but-
beyond, so as you talk about the technical skills, right?
Mhm.
So beyond technical skills, I want to bring in something. What life lessons do you hope your students get or take away from studying the violin?
Oh wow, there's a ton.
Yeah.
Where we shine is we take a big, snarly, huge, multifaceted problem
Mm-hmm.
and take it apart,
Okay.
solve one thing at a time.
So tell me, the problem is the music. Is the notes that you wanna break apart into what? Into
Well,
singular?
you start. Kids come because they're like, but I want to feel.
Yes.
I want to connect with people. I
Uh-huh.
want to be able to. I want it to sound like this right away.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
What we have are a whole bunch of things that you may or may not have realized were connected.
Yeah.
And we have to solve all of those things, but they have to get solved to 100%. Because
Yeah.
this is where music really shines. Because you've been teaching for some time,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Sorry, my throat is really raw.
That's all right.
So the thing about teaching in music is that you can hear right away. If I go speak a language, like if I go to Italy and I go chit chat with somebody, like little kids mock me openly. It's but everybody goes, no, 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 no. I
Yeah.
understand what
Yeah.
you said. I get a lot of that when I travel.
Sure.
But I don't hear that my grammar's atrocious. I don't hear my accent's weird. I don't hear that. In music, you notice every last little stinking thing. And so where you really have an opportunity to be frustrated is also where you really have an opportunity to grow. Because I can solve, if I can take the problems apart and go like, okay, the form of the body, reading the notes, making my bow drag in a straight line, putting my finger down accurate, because this is in tune, this is out of tune. That's how small it is. And like with a guitar, people are in the frets. I don't have like this far to hit. I have to hit. I have to hit at a like a really precise location. And then there's pressure on the bow and there's all this stuff. So you do one thing at a time and you master it, and then you move on to the next thing. And you also, I think one of the big things it also teaches is you get a little more forgiving with yourself. I mean, there's all of the
that you're not perfect, right? That
Well, but it's not going to be. And then the little guys, they go to recital, and they see the kid who played, because usually somebody will come to one of my recitals before they start.
Sure. Yeah.
And you see the little guys starting in the Wolfie book, and you see it gets better and better and better, and then it starts to get musical, and it starts to get like, wow, that's really pretty. But you see this kid, the next recital is here, and the next recital is here. You know, and it starts to feel possible, and I think that's one of the huge things. There's a lot of blessings in music. Lots.
Yeah. So that's good. So it goes back to maybe where we started off about, you know, the ability to connect with people, the ability to sort of bring in the human experience, right, into life, right? So being able to chat. Are these skills that, you know, kids, your students are getting as well as they come in to learn, right? Relatability, ability to interact across cultures. Is this something that you see as you teach as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of documentation. I mean, I forget what's one of the UBC professors actually that just did the latest big flashy study. But you know, it's pretty well known that your IQ goes up. I will tell you, you know, the science scores go up, the math scores go up, your English scores go up, and fairly substantially. Yeah, just listening. They did the first studies at the first ones that got famous anyhow that I'm aware of. That Irvine, and just listening for 20 minutes, you got a temporary bump. And they don't really know why. They just know it stimulated some part of the brain. And then that lasted for a while. I remember I sat in, one of my friends had a psych experiment, and I sat, because they bribe you. You're a college student, hungry. And so I had to listen to, I think it was The Clash and then Silence, and then take a spatial relations test. But it's funny for musicians, because what we use to measure IQ is the same kind of skill that you're practicing when you practice 4 to 6 a day. So what a shock that would make the IQ points go up.
Wow.
But, you know.
Wow. And so okay, that makes sense now, because I know at some point last month or last week, I can't remember because we just always talk a lot. You told me that your students then go on to Harvard, to Stanford, to MIT, or look for places in Drexel, or Dartmouth College. That's because their IQ really just goes straight through the roof, right? Then they are easily accepted into these Ivy League schools.
Well, typically, I mean, most of my kids these days are trying to get, like, you know, last year, like, we're still waiting to find out who goes where this year. But last year I had one MIT. I had 3 graduating kids. One went to MIT, one went to Stanford. The other one went to the UW for computer science and honors, which is, again, there was lots of tears. She was very upset. But I've only had one get Harvard. But Stanford is very popular in my studio, and MIT is very popular. And the MIT kids, you have to win a big prize. I mean, there's so much. I didn't come for money. So, you know, for me, it was a shock. I mean, it was really amazing for me when I saw how intense the parenting is for what grooming a kid in the States looks like at those schools. There's a lot of money involved. Anybody who tells you otherwise is Either they don't
Yeah.
know or they're full of it.
So interesting. So let's talk about that a bit. Just maybe for this, you and I have had conversations about the importance of early childhood development, particularly solid early childhood development.
Yeah.
So, and you work with students of various ages. What have you seen, right? So you talk about a lot of money going into parenting, etc. What have you seen that you'd like to share with us about the importance of this early education bit that you've observed as you work with students?
Oh man, there's a lot of things. I watch some really amazing parenting.
Yeah.
I have a lot of parents. There's a couple things that I really, I think it's really important for parents to have a life that the kids look at and think, I want to belong to that. Because I think that parents.
Whoa, pause. Please repeat that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it is very easy for parents to sacrifice their entire life just for the kid. My life is over, but I'm just going to that's a really dangerous thing to do to a kid, first of all, because it puts them in a bind. I mean, it's like everything else. You got to step into your shoes. You got to step into their shoes. You got to step into the people around us, because in a couple that's raising a kid, you've got your hopes and dreams, their hopes and dreams, its hopes and dreams. And they're not walking out into the same world we do.
No, they're not.
And it doesn't look anything similar. But I think, they really need to see that you've got a life you love, because if you just sacrifice, you're not going to look at your life and think, I want to belong to that. Yeah. And you just sacrificed your entire life so that your kid can have, But that leaves them alone in the world, which they don't want, and they don't need it. But the schools, I always tell them, I deal with a lot of kids who get good schools, and I deal with a lot of kids who are like, why didn't I? Over perfect SATs, it's over perfect grades, it's over perfect. I don't know that the admissions process is as fair as we would like to believe it is. And I always tell them, the people that I've had that have come back from Harvard, the one from Harvard was particularly fun. There was a student who was a Stanford grad who was grown, who was waiting for their kid. And those two got into it. And I was like in the middle. And he was like, they just select for people that are already going places. But, he was having a day. I mean, I will tell you, my school, like having a small, when I was at Whitman, there were 1,000 students there. You had a 13-to-1 student to faculty ratio. Nowhere to hide. Wow. There is nowhere to hide. I had classes grading on a curve with 5 kids, 7 kids. Good luck showing up. Elizabeth Warren, who I don't know if you guys know who she is. She's one of our senators. She's really funny. Elizabeth Warren taught one of her.
Elizabeth Warren. I know
Elizabeth Warren taught Katie Porter. And they both talk about being grateful for kids showing up hungover in class, because they're just like, they make it better at going like, no. But I think it's really important. You've got to have a balance. You're trying to be connected to a community. You always have to step back and ask, what is the life I'm trying to build? There's a lot of talk in the States about, the whole, oh shoot, I'm going to lose who it was. It was John Locke, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Pursuit of happiness,
We talk a lot about this, but it's like, if you don't see your life as filled with joy, why on earth would they want to join that? And
that's so important. I mean, because as parents, and I speak as a parent too, right? That my day is, composed of just trying to work hard so that the kids can get what I feel the kids want, right? But I think you bring in an important point, right? That there has to be joy in doing what I am doing, right? Because the kids are observing and the kids are watching that. And if there's no joy in that, then they'll be like, why is he stressing himself?
My mom and I talked about this a lot, because again, we grew up with, nothing. And my mom felt really bad. She was like, but you didn't get, because I'm the littlest in the family, right? So she's like, you didn't get this and you didn't get that. And I'm like, Mom, you walked me out of, the Kansas. She walked me out of basically Trump country. To the Pacific Northwest, where I would make the argument that that's probably a better, easier place for women to grow up. But I was raised here. What do I know?
Okay.
But she walked me into the home that I love, basically. It's the part that matters. I wouldn't be who I am if I'd been raised around other people. The environment's going to matter. Your parents are going to matter. And if they're unhappy all the time, of course that's going to be bad. Of course trying to have a kid who's going to spend time instead of figuring out who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're looking at your journey going like, well, it's hopeless anyway.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm like, Mom, you're a person in the room. Yeah. It's, I mean, because I'm a bit older than you, right? So it's like, Mom and I had a lot of chances. Like I said, I just lost my mom. And I spent time caring for her. We had a lot of heart-to-hearts.
Yeah.
And a lot of, you know, she's like, I'm so sorry about this. And I'm like, really seriously, the world is the world.
Yeah.
Wherever you walk out into it, you need enough that you stay alive and are healthy. And you get to be a person.
Yeah.
And this is, again, I would argue this is a big advantage of the art. Nobody turns to us and says, well, you don't get to be a person. We're going to make you just be a technician. Because it's a thing with the arts. Like, if you're only a technician and not in the world, that would be like you're somebody who make money. Or you're only like really sensitive but messy.
Yeah.
Those people don't work so much. It's considered to be more desirable to see the world through your own eyes and to have balance. And balance is tough, man.
It's tough, and I'm just looking at our time now. We are coming up to close to the time to wrap up our conversation. But as I just process a lot of the things that you're saying, I mean, just bringing joy into the everyday work or into the everyday human experience is important. And I think it's also telling, right? Like when we first met, that again, you joined into the conversation that we were having and because of just trying to find this aspect of joy. And so on that note, can you share perhaps with me and to the listeners, what is your most particularly memorable moment or performance experience that you've had in your career thus far?
Oh, man. I think a lot about when I went to go play for Dr. Bellina for the first time.
Okay.
I was so...
This was in New York, right? You played for her in New York? Yep.
This was in New York. I'm an enormous David Oistrakh fan, who you've probably heard of. He's very, very famous. But Russian player from, and he passed, I think in 70, something like that. When I think about, having, the first thing that she said to me was like, musically, I don't like, and I was so frazzled. I had been out with people, and some people loved me and some people hated me. And I was terrified to play for her because she was a big name on my list. I mean, one of the, but the one I wanted. And I went to go, and I just was at a point where I was like, that's it. I'm going to be me. Yeah. And I remember watching her sitting there like smoking and watching me. Yeah. But she didn't, she was like, you do this, you do this, you do this, you know? And I didn't feel like I had to work to be accepted. I didn't feel like I had to change to be accepted. I felt like she wanted to take who I was and let it out, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
That was, I mean, the first thing she said, she went, I could win competitions with you. And then I did, but I didn't get to go work with her at Venice. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Carolyn, I'd love to pick up this conversation again with you.
And I want to know, can I ask something really fast?
Yeah.
What made you write a book?
What made me write a book?
Yeah.
Great question. And I think it was a sum total of life experiences, right, that collided at a certain point in time in my life that led me to say, you know what? I need to reflect on all of these things and put them down. And I put them down as a story, as a letter to my kids, right? Because I was going through some profound hardships, having moved to the Pacific Northwest, going through my doctoral program at a local university, and through that process, experiencing some hardships that were unimaginable, right? And I said, oh my word, why am I going through this right now? And so began to write this story to my children so that they could use it as perhaps a tool or something to support their own life, right? When they come of age. That's what started me in writing the book. Yeah, so the book really was just a story that, yeah, it was initially just a short story for my kids to read at some point in their lives, but then it just became more a whole collection of my whole life's experiences to the point to around a certain period. But yeah, that's why I wrote the book.
But see, this is wonderful because that's the stuff you treasure. I mean, like I said,
Yeah,
I just had all these long heart to hearts with my mom before she
yeah,
passed.
yeah,
And she just kept saying, but I'm sorry, I had to do, and I'm like, life isn't perfect, man.
yeah,
Just show
yeah,
up and
yeah,
love the person in front of you.
yeah.
And that's
Exactly.
it's gonna mean more to your kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true. Life isn't perfect. And I remember I had my heart to heart with my own late father too, right? Just before he passed. And we had such, call it maybe a full circle, like sort of closing the loop, because
Yeah.
growing up, as my memoir says, like I wrote about my experiences with my dad. They were not as rosy, but yeah, when he passed on, we had such a beautiful and such treasured relationship,
Yeah.
and that made me understand the struggles that he was going through when he was perhaps my age at
Yeah.
that time. And now I'm seeing all of these things myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish Dad was around and I could ask him this question and this
Yeah.
question and this question
Yeah.
and this question. But
Yeah.
yeah, just being able to put those experiences in a book for my family to read, for my kids to read, but share that with the world is also just a joy and a privilege as well, as people navigate different, regardless of
Yeah.
culture, regardless of where people come from. There are always these different things that we have to grapple with on a day-to-day basis. And so yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
I gotta say, but I got 38 years in teaching, like
Yeah.
38, and I'm like,
Wow.
every parent is
Yeah.
looking for the same. You know what I mean? We want to feel
Yeah.
connected. We want our kids to be happy. We
Yeah.
want to be loved. We want,
Yeah.
and I just borrow other people, so I just get to
Yeah.
kind of stand a little. I'm a good
Yeah,
little
that's true.
snarky. That's why.
I mean, part of it too, and I was reflecting about this 2 days ago, right? Part of this human experience too is that we are coming in. So I teach a lot about adverse childhood experiences, right? So when I'm
Yeah.
teaching ECE workers, or I'm, at the university, I talk about adverse childhood experiences, that as parents, many things that we try to do now for our children is to address the things that we never had. And I heard you speak about that as we were
Yeah.
sharing about, your mom saying, well, I never gave you this. I never, and then we try to have compensatory behaviors as parents, right? To address those
Yeah.
very same things. But I loved what you said, that your kids have to see joy. Children have to see joy in you doing the things that you love. They have to see you enjoying it. They have to see you being passionate about it, right? And just not doing it because it's a sense of duty or it's an obligation that you have to fulfill. And so dealing with adverse childhood experiences is an important aspect of our own growth, but also importantly, an important aspect of having to deal with sort of mental health issues, particularly when when I think of myself too, and sometimes the mental health struggles that I have are primarily related to my own growth experience, primarily related to the adverse childhood experiences that I went through, right?
Yeah.
And then try work 3 times, 4 times as hard to make up
Yeah.
for the things that I never had. So yeah, interesting experiences.
I think that stuff's fascinating. I mean, I just did my mom's eulogy, and I was talking about all the stuff that she successfully protected me from.
Yeah.
But you don't know when you're a kid.
You
And you
don't.
go back later and you're like,
You
oh
don't.
God, it hadn't occurred. But
Oh,
the
I have meetings with my late dad when I'm taking walks. I'm like, oh, dude, now I
yeah,
get it. Like I'll be speaking,
yeah,
I'm like, dude, now I get it.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh, dude, now I get it. Oh, okay, I remember this time, like 25 years ago, you were doing this and this and this and this. Absolutely didn't make any sense. But dude, wherever you are, just know that I get it.
yeah,
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 yeah. I get it. And our parents would raise us with the information that they knew at that particular time, in the same way that my wife and I are raising our kids with the information that we have at this particular time. Perhaps in 20, 30 years time, they'll look back and be like, what were parents trying to do? what were they even trying to conceive? Like, what was that all about, right? But
Yeah.
we're doing all of this with the best of intentions, with just the available information that we have about parenting, about teaching, and also about sort of the experiences that we're drawing away from our own childhood experiences.
There was an interview that I saw
Mm-hmm.
recently. Bessel van der Kolk was talking about how many things that he had tried,
Yeah.
you know, when he was working on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about his first kid was easy and
Yeah.
the second kid not so much.
Yeah.
And so all of these things that they tried and tried and tried and tried.
Yeah.
And then they ended up doing, you know, like the hardcore studies on them. Because it's like, oh my God, all right, it's finally. Because that's what you do. But we think we've got this idea in our head that life is not going to be messy. If I don't screw up, then nothing will be messy. And I'm like, I have news for you. It's like,
and I mean,
work.
I see it a lot too, right? Sort of working in the child development sector. Like I see it even, you know, when I visit people's homes and they've got young babies, I see it, right? I'm like, oh, okay, this is their first one. So they're still, you know, it's an egg. Like, granted, right, babies are egg, we love them, right? But I'm like, okay, wait until the second comes. And then the third one comes and you're like, nah, don't worry, they can cry. Don't, you know, they're not going to die because of crying. Nah, the lungs are going to be stronger and that kind of thing, right? And so again, it's just this journey of parenting and raising children based on the information that we have at a particular level or a particular stage in life. And now we've done so many research pieces and, you know, groundbreaking research that has really, really sort of turned the tide around child development. What's important, we talk about developmentally appropriate milestones now that we watch out for, the indicators that we look at as we look at, you know, how a child is developing both in the home as well as in the classroom, and perhaps even as they play outside with their peers too.
Yeah.
So exciting times. And so all of that for me then goes back to this notion that I, you know, continually speak to you about, and you and I chat about, right? That's missing, particularly with our neighbors in the South where you are there, you know, in terms of just this aspect of kindness and humanity and centering compassion, right? And so all of these things that are happening politically are kind of trying to, you know, sort of, in my view, respectfully, trying to swing the pendulum from, you know, a world that is caring, that is compassionate, that is full of joy, to a world that is, you know, fist past the post. Like, well, it has to be about us. It has to be about us as Americans. It has to be about us and this and this and this. I hope that, you know, at some stage, hopefully soon, perhaps your midterms will be telling. We don't know, but that, you know, that swing, that pendulum would sort of come back again to center all the good things that people have to offer, right? You know, the kindness, the humanity, the compassion, and the wellness that we have to center as we all live on this earth.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we need to talk to each other as a country, but there's a lot of talk down here, and you and I talked about this. There's a lot of, like, you know, you can't go to crazy. The people that are like, I'm just going to pretend that I'm the only person and only my needs matter, and I'm going to get mine and then pull the ladder up. I'm like, no.
No, we can't do that. There has to be, and I love what you say, that we've got to talk to each other. So you all need to have a family meeting.
Yes, we do.
Right, a family meeting and sort a few things that have, you know, really sort of gone on the wayside, and hopefully, you know, correct the things that need to be sorted out. But Carolyn, I'm really, really glad to have spoken with you on this podcast. I know you and I will continue our conversations and our visits. But for now, for our listeners, thank you for joining us on Voices Listed podcast show with Dr. PMAC. Really enjoyed my conversation with Carolyn Willis, an accomplished violinist and dedicated violin instructor based in Bellevue in Seattle. Carolyn, thank you so much for making the time.
Oh, it was great fun. It was great fun, Patrick. We'll talk again.
Thank you for listening to the Voices Listed podcast with Dr. PMAC. I hope you enjoyed insights that came out of this conversation. Keep your notifications on. Our next episode will be dropping soon. Thank you and enjoy.